Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and it's time for another Tasting Tuesday. And today I am getting all patriotic, and I am going to go red, white, and blue. Yes, except I'm doing it Scotch style. Always bucking the trends, I am. So, here we go. We're going to start off with Johnnie Walker Red Label, then we're going to go to Dewar White Label, and finish up in a separate video with Johnnie Walker Blue. The reason I'm going to put that in a separate video is because really the pairing of these first two is a pairing of somewhat equals. They're both blended whiskeys. They're both 40% alcohol. They're both really at the bottom line of their brand lines. So whereas Johnnie Walker Blue, we're talking about a difference of 20 to 25 bucks. 20 to 25 bucks, 160 to probably, I've seen it at $300 in some places, depending on where you get it. So it gets its own little show later on. Right now, let's focus on some of the bargain brands. And so Johnnie Walker Red Label, I've heard about for a long time. I actually had a friend of mine bring a bottle over. He knew I had Johnnie Walker Black, and that I thought Johnnie Walker Black was a good blend, and he said, well, people put down Red Label and say it's just for cocktails, but it's actually pretty decent. So he gave me a sample. I tasted it around a lot of other whiskeys, and I thought, actually this isn't so bad. So I wanted to get my own bottle and then have a chance to do a review on that. As well as I wanted to do a review on Dewar White Label. Now, I do own a bottle of Dewar, and you'll notice that is a small little mini bottle. And the reason I bought a mini bottle of this is because I wasn't sure I really wanted to commit to it. Now, it is $20 a bottle, so that's not a huge commitment. And so if I like it, I can go back and get myself a bottle of it very easily. There's plenty of it. These are not hard whiskeys to find. Johnnie Walker, I think I don't know if it's just Red Label, but I know that Johnnie Walker as a brand is second only to Jack Daniel's in the world. And so it is widely available anywhere you go. You go to a bar, you're going to see Red Label. You usually see Black Label as well. Dewar, in most cases, you're going to see a bottle of that. Two, if it's a bar that has a lot of scotches. If they don't have a lot of scotches, you may or may not see, or you may see the 12-year, one or the other. The 12 is very affordable, so there's no reason that I can see yet, until I do this tasting, to reach out and grab myself a bottle of Dewar White Label. Now, there's a lot of history between these two brands. They're only really brand-wise about 8 years apart from each other, 9 years. Dewar, the White Label, was really a celebration by A.J. Cameron, the master blender at Aberfeldy. This was really the opportunity to create a blend that would showcase the whiskeys that they were making at that brand new Aberfeldy distillery. Johnnie Walker, on the other hand, this was 1899. 1908 is when Red Label became an official brand. Prior to 1908, there was a Red Label. People called it Red Label, but it was called Old Highland Whiskey. And so that was the original brand that Johnnie Walker went under. And so they had a red, a white, and a black. So the White Label disappeared. It disappeared right at the end of World War I. And probably part of the reason it disappeared is because Dewar White Label at that point was a bigger seller than Johnnie Walker, and having two different whiskeys called White Label obviously was going to create some issues. So, and especially from two big competitors. Both of these are very historic brands. Johnnie Walker, if you read the label, I'm going to give you a little education on this label here. John Walker and Sons you'll see the striding man at the bottom. He was introduced by an artist named Tom Brown in 1908. So when they came up with this little sideways label, they came up with him at the same instance. And then it's established in 1820. Well, here's the thing about that. John Walker was in his early 20s when he started a grocery store, spirit shop, and wine shop. And that was in 1820. When did he start blending whiskey? Well, probably more around 1840 when he converted the shop over to just into doing whiskey. And so that date is slightly misleading in suggesting that they were actually making whiskey at that time. Don't know if there's any proof that they were. And so that would set John Walker, founder, in around the same time, little before John Dewar started this. He started Dewar in 1846. Same situation. Grocer, had a little wine, spirit shop, and it just kind of developed. So they have a similar kind of a background. They're also similar in the way that John Walker was not around to see the great success of the brand, nor did John Dewar. Both of them had passed away by the time their sons took them over. Alexander with Johnnie Walker, and Tommy Dewar and John Dewar, the son, were the ones that really took Dewar to the next level and made it a worldwide brand. And you can go back and listen to episode 1 of Whiskey Lore, the podcast, and you'll hear all about Tommy Dewar and his genius as a marketer and how he really made Scotch whiskey famous the world over. Both of these guys, the founders, were local and were well respected locally. And it wasn't until 1860 that there actually was a change in the law. Prior to 1860, in Britain, you could not blend a single malt with a grain whiskey. So it took the Spirits Act of 1860 before you could actually blend a grain whiskey with a malt whiskey. And so it was that turning point that really shot blends off into the stratosphere for the latter half of the 19th century. And a lot of that was to compete with the Irish, because the Irish really, with their triple distilled whiskeys, were softer on the palate, easier to drink. They weren't those unbridled single malts that were coming out of the Highlands. And so there was a reputation around Irish whiskey, and Scotch whiskey needed to catch up in that particular instance with the average palate. So Johnnie Walker Red on the nose is actually really nice. I get a little bit of alcohol in there. You can smell a little bit of the youth in it, but there's a lot of apple in this. I get some of the grain in there, and maybe a bit of honey in there, just a little bit of honey. It has some nice legs on it. It's got a nice medium body to it. It's not thin. It's not, one of those nice, heavy, thick, viscous whiskeys, though. It's right there in the middle. There's a lot of pepper on this. What I love about this whiskey is that it has one of my favorite flavors in it. And you have to kind of look for it at first. And you really have to keep searching for it because that pepper lingers, but it's butterscotch. So you get a little fruit, a little apple again, kind of carries through, butterscotch, and the butterscotch stays on the palate. And in a way, when you get to the end, it kind of feels like the whiskey just disappeared on you, but it does stay with you. That pepperiness, the heat of that pepperiness kind of sticks with you, and that sense of butterscotch does not go away. It just lingers through the whole thing. It's really interesting. A little bit of spice in there, maybe at the end also. Would I drink this by itself? I would. Would I add water to it? Probably not. It's already 40%. It has a nice body to it, but it could probably easily be watered down too quickly. No, I think you can drink that straight as it is and be fine with it. It's actually a pretty decent whiskey for its price point. If I were going to put it up, and maybe I'll compare them someday, but if I was going to put it up against the blended malt like Shackleton, or put it up against a Jameson, I would probably drink that before I would drink Jameson, actually. I think it's got a little bit more personality to it. Shackleton, though, I would drink Shackleton before I would get that. But if you gave me a bottle of this, I would drink it. All right, this is the Dewar. And this is the white label, not the blue. So this one is not as fruit forward on the nose. There's apple and honey. Maybe this is something that a basic blend. This is what, you can tell they add colorant to this to try to make it appealing to people. And maybe there's something about honey and apple that are appealing to people. Yeah. But maybe not to the whiskey connoisseur. What I would say is that these are not complex whiskeys from what I can tell so far. Oh, wow. I took a nice deep breath in on that. Got some baking spice out of that as well. Yeah, I mean, it's got a nice nose. It's a little lighter. Talk about bit of honey. Wow. Get a nice mouthful of that, and it reminds me of bit of honey. It has a little toffee to it. It's got that honey to it. I've taken smaller sips of this, and it's underwhelming, but a nice mouthful. Just let it sit there for a minute. The pepperiness is not there. It's not peppery like this is. There's maybe a hint of it. The wood, a little bit of a tannin bitterness to it, but just a hair. It's not bad. I get peach. There's definitely some peach on the palate, on the finish, that just kind of lays there. There's also some burnt toast that kind of lingers in there as well. And so I'm impressed because the first time I sipped it, I didn't get enough in my mouth, and it was just thin and didn't really impress me. But more of it in your mouth gives more of an impact. And so, yeah, that steps up a bit. It's different from 12. It's definitely different from 12. 12 is, to me, a bit more fruity than this is. This has a certain amount of dryness to it, but still really nice whiskey and maybe a bit cleaner, although to me, it doesn't linger as long. And in a way, I kind of like that in the Johnnie Walker Red. So, look, I can see people's point about using these as mixers. They're not complex whiskeys, but they're very enjoyable to drink. I wouldn't have a problem if you put a glass of either of these in front of me. These are probably what I consider conversation whiskeys from a standpoint of, if you're having a conversation with a friend and you don't want a whiskey to get too in your way during a conversation, but you still want to enjoy the whiskey, then I would say that these two would do fine for that. And so it really makes me interested in what my opinion is going to be when I drink this one, because as you will find out in the next episode, my first taste of this probably wasn't overly successful, but then again, I didn't put very much in the glass and I did not put very much in my mouth. And I'm going to tell you one of the things I did, a technique that I learned in Colorado that I think really helped me get a better sense of this whiskey. And we'll find out once I do a tasting of it here in a few minutes, whether that comes through with a little bit more substantial intake on the palate. So Johnnie Walker Blue is coming up next. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave your comments if you would like to. Have you had either of these? Do you think I'm crazy and these are just mixers and I should just leave it alone? Or would you accept a glass of either of these? Or would you even buy these to drink on their own? What do you think? And until next time, cheers and slán Java.